All right, good afternoon and morning, everybody. So welcome to today's Building Smart USA webinar series. Today we'll be talking about the Building Smart Data Dictionary Service in the U.S. National Standard Content, or the USDD. My name is Aaron Costin. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Florida and current chair of the USDD work group. And so today we're going to kind of give you a general idea of what the Building Smart Data Dictionary is. So we're going to start of what is a data dictionary. We're going to look at the Building Smart Data Dictionary as a service, as well as a proposal for a national standard for a US data dictionary. And finally, we'll discuss about how to get involved with the engagement, and we'll end with a questions and answers. So thank you for joining. So what is a data dictionary? So it's in the name. It's a data dictionary. It's a dictionary about data, but what is data? And so it's a little more than just what's in its name. It's essentially, it's a centralized repository of information about the data, such as meaning, relationships to other data, origin, usage, and format. And so it's data about data. It's metadata. And so this is used to catalog and communicate the structure of the content, provides the meaningful descriptions for individually named objects. So essentially, it gives context to the data being stored. So here's kind of like the metadata that is stored within a data dictionary. And this example is from the Building Smart Data Dictionary that we'll be talking, right? So there's data about the domain, who's using the domain, who's in part of it, what language is it, what are the different classifications of that metadata, right? So the data that you're going to be host, what is stored, what does that mean? And you have different property sets that you can talk about how those data interoperate and link to each other. And since it's the Building Smart, we also include the IFC classifications. So the IFC definitions that's already been defined, how can we link the data that we're going to be stored to those specific descriptions? And so data is just more than the storage of that data, right? So the old and sensitive data is just let's collect the data about it. But now we're seeing a more revolutionary where the data dictionary, it's composed of a dictionary, the definitions. It's composed of glossary, which means it's domain specific. Any domain can upload their content, as well as any formal classifications, right? So that's data dictionary in traditional sense. But if we take our content and we organize them, such as taxonomy, where we classify things how they relate, we can then start populating instances, having user-defined properties or presets, and then incorporating this ontological method. You can start inferencing what does this data mean, right? So there's powerful machines out there, these engines that can read what you have and then make inferences. And so with this, we'll then start we're then in turn can store this back into a data dictionary. So there's tons of concept, there's tons of power in what we're seeing in this data dictionary concept. And so why a dictionary? Why not just an ontology or taxonomy or other structured libraries? Well, like I said, it's a powerful machine. So not only does it define the structure and meaning of those contents, it ensures that they're consistent. They're consistently used by all the stakeholders, right? And specifically in our building domain or construction, there's a lot of stakeholders that's going to have to use that data. And so defining this in this type of structure ensures we're able to use that consistently, right? And another powerful way of this is that it is an efficient way to organize knowledge for subsequent retrieval. And one of the biggest tools is the semantic web. We're able to query data all over the internet, and that's a powerful tool. The semantic web discussion is one of its own, but just to understand that we're able to interconnect all this data throughout the internet. And so that means that BIM and web-based contexts or the semantic annotations can be applied to the model. Meaning you can have a model and the definitions of those models are all over the world, essentially. So you don't have to store all that information in one, and that in turn further enhances exchange and interoperability of data exchange. So now we can have these powerful models, these BIM models that are defined, with classification throughout the internet, throughout the world, and that means that we can, continue to enhance. And if there's any changes, you'll be able to see those changes in real time to those definitions. And so then we get to that concept of the buildingSMART data dictionary as a service. And so last year, buildingSMART International published their technical roadmap, laying out the concepts and reasonings behind the needs to further evolve and mature their technologies. All right, and one of their goals is a digital way of working for the industry. And so this infographic from the roadmap describes how buildingSMART should be migrated away from some technologies and methods and more towards the usable approaches. So in particular, this includes the reimaging of the buildingSMART data dictionary as a primary software as a service platform with content contributed from the other stakeholders beside itself. And so not only is this bSDD is moving from individual use cases, they're providing the content and the way of describing that content so it can be used at a higher adoption. Right? And then because it's part of buildingSMART International, it has that multiple interfaces with things. As we saw, there's ways to represent the data. And so in of itself, the bSDD has a very canonical databases. So it's mathematical driven. Each domain has their own content, so they can also include their own rules and rule-based sets. And mentioned before, it has that linked data interface, which is that data of the semantic web. And with this new buildingSMART DD, they're having the JSON API. So now we can have those interlinks of the model-based software to the web, and finally we can also include what's the the ISO 12006-3, which is the organization of the object-oriented information. So we can start integrating how to use that data in that object-oriented way, such as ExpressG and IFCs. Okay? And so how does that work essentially? Now linking to the IFC, you get the definitions and the elements from the main kernel, right? So all your basic materials properties, right? And then IFC is only good for you can only extend it for so long before it gets too convoluted. And so what this data dictionary does now is gives that additional layer. So now individual domains or user groups can define their own classifications on top of those, right? And so the large view examples of product move down to the door, right? To the IFC door. So now using those concepts, these domains can now put additional use sets and property sets to make it a front door, and even further to make it a custom smart door. And so having this relationship with the bSDD on top of IFC is going to be powerful for the future of defining our elements. And so the bSDD is an information management framework, right? So you have to have the content. It has to be, one way to look at this is proposed by buildingSMART International as part of their open BIM mission, right? So we have content, and then we have what is called the agency. So there's that process expertise. They make sure that that content abides by the rules. It provides the services and tools and access to the buildingSMART data dictionary. And one of the key features of this is, the content is owned by the agency that provides it, right? The users that input this content. So the agency is able to make sure it abides by all the rule sets, and then in turn is able to provide the data as a service, right? So it's a centralized database, there's multiple access, and there's a multitude of content that can be shared and managed throughout, right? And that's the essence of the open BIM, the essence of interoperability through the frameworks. And so, some of these questions of having this openness is, how do we deal with managing lots of content and getting its property distributed, right? And so that's where the service comes in. So the new bSDD version 5 is that service. It has that database framework, so you're able to store data, you're able to store the contents, You can, these agencies that work together can aggregate their international DDs, right? So they can make sure that, the rule sets are similar, so we're not defining things again. And then with that, there's different common editing tools and processes. So if you look at the link down below, kind of gives you the overview of the data dictionary in more detail. You're able to search content. You can search based on classification, based on form and function. And so with that, you're able to have that centralized access with the APIs and web services. So if you need that content within your own processes, you're able to get that and work with the software vendors with that API. All right, and then again, part of that search, you're able to find the content and what is being available to use, and we'll talk about that in a few slides. All right, and so there's been one example with the National Dutch Build Construction classification inside SketchUp, right? So how does the end user use the data dictionary, right? So you can attach the classifications. So this is the example of that Dutch company, or the Dutch construction with Digibase, and this is it within SketchUp. All right, so it's a simple modeling approach. You have your building, and with your classifications, you can select and view what are those classification specs. Right, so there's a lot of applications, where we can do. Hopefully, you can see the text. So they're clicking through the building to pull up the classification for the IFC building. They have a wall panel, and one of the properties is features of the classification system is you get 5 different filters, and so it's going to pull up, what you selected based on the classification. So you can have quantity, takeoff, materials, and then see what the different property sets are. There's more videos and demonstrations on the buildingSMART International website, but that's just to show that there's, these are powerful tools that you can link within within software. Okay, so now that leads us to the U.S. data dictionary, right? So as a U.S. chapter, we are proposing that we'll have our own USDD that taps into the bSDD, serving the national build asset industry. Right, and so just like the same idea of the agency content service, this USDD would be the agency and the owner of that process. So the content we would hold will be the variety of the whole built industry, right? So we have ASHTOs, the transportation, we have the steel information, concrete information. So it's not just limited to a certain domain, but we have entirety of the U.S. Information. So home builders, architects. So it's just, just a bunch of information. And so what that means is they'll provide the contents to this dictionary, and the U.S. chapter, as the agency, will be able to, shepherd that, provide that service to make sure all the definitions of classifications, they're met, all the mappings and linkings around the different classification systems are met. And so with that, then we can link that to the Built International framework as a service. And so the benefit of this is the content can be aggregated from many different sources, right? So all these different definitions. Think about how many definitions are there for, beams or girders or columns or what it means to be something. So the distribution of this content is centralized and handled by a third-party service with cost below self-hosting. So essentially, the data will be hosted. Without this content to begin with, there will not be data. There will not be the service being able to provide it. So, see, the ownership, ownership is owned by the content agencies who own it or who provided it. It could remain as is, but submittal to the national standards, DD makes the content, quality assured, quality controlled, and distributed responsibility of the buildingSMART. And so this still allows the other content of owners to be free to engage with BSI directly, but they're also at their own expense, right? So So essentially, anybody can work with the BSI, but forming together as a U.S. chapter, as a USDD, we can aggregate those definitions and help with that agencies together. All right, and so we initially started with a content focusing on transportation, and so there's a lot of terms we have that's already been harmonized from AASHTO to FHWA, ACI, and PCI, and we're trying to get more of that involved. So currently we have spreadsheets of thousands of terms, different elements, different property relationships that we're starting to populate the data dictionary. Terms, definitions, different mappings and classifications out there, mappings to the other schemas, including IFC, land ML. And again, it's not just the one domain. We have transportation and the built environment. Right? And so, this kind of asks the question is, how do you distribute that content to software developers and end users? And how do you reliably and consistently maintain that content? Right? So all these different terms need to be harmonized, but they have to be provided by a service. And so this alone, you'd have some issues such as, authority, tools, who can use it, who has access to the data, processes, and quality. But that can all be, the solution is to provide that agency, right, to be able to mapped out by that content. Mitigated was the word I was looking for. That these issues can all be mitigated through the different, the relationships we formed on this. And so our proposal is to be, the USDD be that middleman, right, by leveraging the U.S. chapter of the buildingSMART International. So based on the background information and identified issues, there is recommendations of governments, further development, maintenance, storage, distribution, and access to the data dictionary. And one of the ways that's being initiated is by the TPF 5372 Pool Fund, Binford Bridges and Structures. And so there are components of that recommendations. There's 5 or 6 about that for the governments. All right, so again, our proposal is to have this U.S. data dictionary, as a centralized content across the domains as showed before. It will be a national consensus standards. Currently, it is infrastructure, but we are intending to include buildings. That management agent will be the USD working group, which is the subset of the technical committee. And so we will assure that the data that is uploaded will be owned by whomever is putting that up there. So that's important for the use. But with that, as an agency, we're able to help disseminate that information to make sure it is consistent throughout that. And so kind of our proposal for the business plan is, as we go in this as a chapter, as a U.S. standard, we're able to aggregate those costs. Now, additionally, each person or each entity can work directly with the buildingSMART International Data Dictionary directly, but that means they have to provide their own content, they have to do their own management, they have to do their own quality assurance. Together as a U.S. chapter, we're able to consolidate all that. We only have one point of agencies where we can make sure all those terms are able to be aggregated. And so we're kind of showing that now with the pool fund study. And so here, the USDD governance is shown here. So there's the executive committee above there, and it with the rest of the industry committees of all the different domains. The actual DD is shown here under the working group, right? And so we're part of that technical chair under the special committees, but we're able to work with all the other groups because of our governance structure and because that we have the same, it's built to be shared across domains, right? We have those aggregations. So currently, structure is shown. Jeff Ouellette, who wasn't able to be here today, he's on vacation to finally take some time off. I know he's put a lot of work and effort in providing this, so shout out to Jeff for being able to do all this together, and not just this, the presentation, but the working of the committee. And so there's other members of the committee of the committee there, and of that, there's that specific working group. And right now, we're looking to have contact representatives. Right, so full funnel working with AASHTO, FHWAs, and DOTs. We're already involved with AISC, the Steel Committee, and then National Steel Bridge Alliances, as well as ACI, PCI. So we all have stakeholders to provide content, and we're trying to find more. And the other thing we're looking into is getting more vendors involved, like how to get their insight with this, to make sure that they're able to have more streamlined approaches when using APIs into the content. So overall, we're looking to form this working group to have a variety of all the representatives that we're all the stakeholders that we're representing. And so here's an example proposal or example of the governance structure in the point of view of AASHTO, right? So AASHTO has their own technical committees that they have to be involved with. They're working with other joint committees. And so, for example, this Transportation Fuel Fund, we're able to create and review DDs, DD terms around transportation. Right? And those terms are reviewed for consistency by the AASHTO committees, in this case, the Committee of Bridges and Structures, right? Just like we're doing, but then what to do with that next is, well, if we want to start linking the other technical committees within AASHTO, like the concrete committees or the steel committees, to make sure they can get their insight on this too. And so that will be passed up. And once that AASHTO as a group is able to ballot and approve those data dictionary or the terms and uses and cases, they could then send it up to us with the USDD working group. And so we'll enter that content into the data dictionary. We'll provide the service of uses. We're able to provide workings of the APIs as the guidance, but then we'll be able to put that up at the international data dictionary, which has that content available through APIs. Now, like I mentioned, the US chapter, we provide, this will just be the content and the agencies. But in order to use the functionality of the buildingSMART data dictionary, we have to go at that higher level. Now, to do that access, we can get through that, without the charge, just being as part of the buildingSMART. And so within the USDD plus the buildingSMART DD, we have a whole ecosystem, right? So our US content is incorporated through our domains into the USDD, which is then populated into international. Now from there, that's where the vendors will be able to get the API access to that, which in turn serves the users that provided the content to get go, right? And so like I mentioned before, anybody can incorporate information at the international level, but again, they're going to have to provide their own content. They're going to provide their own agency, which could be a lot more time, effort, and money and costs within that to be used at, right? As part of our proposal for the USDD is we can do that together collectively, and not just that, we're able to share that data and provide that agencies. And so with that, I'd like to hand it over to Dennis. All right.
So thanks everybody for joining. I think we'll open this up for, I think the way that you do this is if you have questions, I think you type them in the chat and we'll try to field them. Basically, this is the second of the webinar series for the buildingSMART US. The buildingSMART US chapter is now about a year old since its kind of reboot. That comes on the tail end of a lot of kind of reinvigoration of the buildingSMART International program. There's really, if you're new to rechecking in, there's really a lot of activity going on internationally, and an expanded agenda beyond sort of traditional IFC. which I think everybody knows is kind of the historical anchor of the bSDD program. What Aaron showed you today, the bSDD Data Dictionary, is just one of several new technology initiatives that are dovetailing with a number of sort of industry partnership initiatives. Obviously, the roads program with AASHTO is a very strong one in the U.S. But we are filling that out with other programs around buildings, around other infrastructure projects, etc. So we'd love you guys to participate as actively as you would like. Becoming a member is kind of a key element of that, either as an individual or as a company. That, among other things, allows you to participate as leaders in directing both the strategy of bSDD US and the technical implementations and the technical standards. So if you are interested in finding out more about that, please contact Ian Howell, who's the I believe, acting president of bSDD US. There is a specific set of programs, and always has been, for hardware and software developers and vendors. Specifically, there's what's called the Solution Provider Group, which is where different vendors get together to work with bSDD to develop, I'd say, the nuances of how the standards and the protocols get implemented. And then there's the general international version of that as well that you get to participate in if you are a US member. There's a very active online forum where a lot of the details and initiatives gets worked out. I believe you can check that out now without being a member, so forums.buildingsmart.org. And then pre and hopefully post-COVID, there are 2 major international summit meetings a year, and we'll probably start doing something for the US chapter as well. And again, those are some of the community things that are going on in the community and some of the benefits of being a member. Next slide. Okay, and then specifically, this has been, I think, the second of the webinar series, maybe the third, but we're sort of doing back-to-back every other month. We'll do something that's more focused on the technical side of things, and then the other side will be more about sort of implementation. So more from kind of from a more usage case, and more from a kind of underlying technology architecture case. So the next one is going to be a focus on the interrelationship between Open, BIM, IFC, and GIS. So those are 2 technologies that are converging quite rapidly. Then in October, I'll be sort of, I think, driving or leading a discussion around the future of IFC, which is really sort of the evolution from where we've been in the past, which has been mostly about sort of file-based exchanges, to the kind of online services and those kind of use cases that the data dictionary is certainly part of. In November, there will be a series of case studies that talk about the kind of the next generation of what people are doing with Open Data Exchange. And then in December, there will be kind of a much deeper dive on the emerging formats that are specifically around the web and web services. So IFC JSON, hopefully we'll talk a little bit about the interface between the data dictionary data, what do we want to call the data service, and how that fits in, and some really interesting ways that these data services are being stitched together using some open source capabilities for doing that kind of stuff. So again, we're really moving quite rapidly forward with a much broader, expanded kind of constellation of data strategies, not just the standards, but also how they fit into this modern world of machines talking to each other, talking to web browsers, talking between data services, file services, etc. Next one.
Sure, Dan. Before we get there, we had a question in chat box.
Okay.
Can you revisit any pointers regarding how vendors can best get involved with the USDD stakeholder representatives?
Yeah, I mean, the first point is contact Ian Howell to discuss that kind of from an administrative perspective. And then I think Jeff Willett and Aaron, who are really leading the conversation, will contact you.
Yep. So here's the contact information again. We'll post this online so you get the information. And if you have any specific questions on the data dictionary, its work itself, you can contact Ian or myself directly. Next slide, there's your connections.
Yep, okay. And I guess, from a technology perspective, these are, let me just say, these are REST APIs. And actually there's a whole series of ways of connecting to the data dictionary, including GraphQL, REST API, I think JSON interfaces, etc. So there's a lot of ways that are really straightforward in modern kind of web-enabled data services. I think in some ways, if you do this kind of work already, the ways of connecting together will be I shouldn't say no-brainer, but it'll be fairly familiar. And then I think that example from Autodesk, the Revit interface, which I think is freely available, is a good example of what you might do. So that's a plugin from Revit that you can check out to give you a sense of what's possible with the data dictionary content. Okay, and then yeah, so I think this may be the last slide. Stay connected. There's our website for the US chapter. We're engaging in social media, so follow us on LinkedIn. Where if you go to the website, you'll see the recordings for the prior webinars. There is a professional certification program that's being developed. So if you're interested in getting certified, and then on LinkedIn, yeah, same thing. You'll see kind of a steady stream of activity, both from us and our affiliates. So next. And then, so here's our email addresses. Feel free to contact us. All right, thanks to everybody for attending. Please reach out to us. I'd love to hear from you guys, and we'll see you hopefully next month.